recover. I received instructions to be sure and discard my clothing and to be sure and keep showering until I reduced the amount of radiation that was on my body. I should point out that I did ask whether we should be doing the same thing in an announcement to people in the community. And of course the answer was a resounding no, because this would create a panic situation.
When the invisible cloud had passed, the total amount of radiation deposited on St. George was far from hazardous. Then you may ask, why were the people asked to stay indoors? For a very simple reason. The Atomic Energy Commission doesn't take chances on safety. It is the...
I happened to be in that film, and a lot of the local people, they used all local people, showing how exciting it was to watch the fallout and trying to depict the safety of everything. Ironically, a good share of the people who were used in that film have died from cancer since that time.
Among them, police officer Earl Cox, merchant Tony Reynolds, Sheriff Roy Renoff.
What was going on Harry Day? A cover-up. That's what was going on. And they were just determined, as far as I could tell, and all that I read, that under no conditions, no matter what happened to people, no matter how heavy the radiation, don't admit that anybody has been harmed. Don't admit that the radiation doses were large enough to harm human beings.
Radiation is not a good thing, but I don't know of any death that's been caused by it. Now, I can't prove, nor to anybody else, that somebody who died at 80 would have lived to be 82 if he hadn't been exposed to a little radiation.
Defenders of the testing, Norris Radbury of the Los Alamos National Laboratory is certainly one, argue that the exact level of danger from radiation is not known.
They can't prove it was caused, I can't prove it wasn't.
But what of the evidence that sometimes the fallout was higher than the official safety standard?
Sometimes you get fooled. The bomb is different than you expected, that's why you test it.
In 52 and 53, the whole thing escalated until they were exploding test bombs on low towers that were sucking up enormous amounts of earth that were 3 and 4 times larger than the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. This was a turning point in terms of human health, because the bigger the bombs, the more the fallout. And to give you an idea, the radiation began to show up in the milk in St. Louis. It showed up in the wheat fields in the upper Midwest, and so on. There was a rainout near Schenectady, New York. We're all downwinders.
After every one in this series of tests, radioactive fallout was recorded at various points all across the United States. For each shot, a picture of the cloud's path. Taken all together, the data shows a pattern of fallout that reached almost every corner of the nation.
It upset a lot of people. That's when people really begin to wonder about just what is this?
A few years after the 1953 test series, Quentin Nyson and others felt pretty sure they knew what this was. By then, cancer was striking in the most brutal way at the very young.
Well, you look at the background of the red hills there in St. George, that's for
Quentin
sure.
Nyson's nephew, his sister-in-law, Helen's son, Sheldon, died of leukemia.
Here we come. Now, there's Sheldon with the cowboy hat on and Bob on this side.
They both got cowboy hats. Sheldon had the light one, Bob had the dark one.
Sheldon died in July 1959, just 3 weeks after his 13th birthday.
You say Sheldon, he died in '59, but did we have many deaths prior to him? And that's when all of it started, didn't it? Kind of boomeranged with.
I can't remember of anybody that I knew of that died with leukemia, yet our little school had 75 kids, and Jessalyn Turner died just a few months before Sheldon, and they both had leukemia. And there was a little baby out to Enterprise at the same time died, and then Carlene Haven and St. George died about the same time, and really...
Well, Dr. Joseph Lyon, epidemiologist, University of Utah, he just studied death certificates. By isolating this area where most of the fallout fell, he turned up evidence that there was an increase in childhood leukemia of about 3 times or 4 times what you normally would expect. They were killing children. They were killing children. And these were kids that were 5 and 7 and 12 and 14. And when you saw the tragedy in terms of the families, it sort of broke your heart.
Between 1956 and 1961, in these small communities alone, 14 children aged 15 or younger died of leukemia.
I was probably the first one that I know of in that area to protest the fallout. And then others picked it up, and they were doing the same thing.
After her son Martin died of leukemia, Martha Laird, who was then Martha Bordoli, moved to northern Nevada. The old ranch near the test site that she left behind appears often in her paintings. She did not leave quietly.
I sent out petitions to all the congressmen, and I sent one to AEC, and I think it was Strauss. His letter was the one that came back and told me it was a small sacrifice to lose a son. Dear Mrs. Bordoli, this letter is in response to the petition regarding nuclear weapon testing on which you were the initial signer. Former President Truman said, the dangers that might occur from the fallout in our tests
involve a small sacrifice when compared to the infinitely greater evil of the use of nuclear bombs in war. Sincerely yours, Louis L. Strauss, Chairman, Atomic Energy Commission.
And this I don't understand. It wasn't his sacrifice, that was my sacrifice. And if they had told me it was going to be my sacrifice, I sure as hell wouldn't have had him there.
Nobody consulted me on the debris fallout in Nevada. But I don't see why you're asking me these questions. I don't care to discuss this.
To this day, Norris Bradbury does not wish to discuss whether people downwind should have been warned about possible danger. He and others believe the testing was in the national interest. However, Bradbury's own relatives lived downwind. His son's family lived in southern Utah at Zion National Park. And his former daughter-in-law, Ellen, remembers that her father-in-law did warn her.
When we moved to Zion, I was pregnant with my second child, and he came and suggested that it wasn't a very good place to stay if you were pregnant or had small children because of the fallout from the testing.
I don't remember anything about that. I don't remember doing it. I don't think I did it, but maybe I did.
At first, I don't think I really understood what he was saying. And he said to me finally, clearly enough, look, this is a serious situation and this is not a good place to be, and you ought to go somewhere else. Then I understood that it was quite unusual and important that he would have broken this, kind of code and said this to me. He didn't want to have anything go wrong with one of his grandchildren.
Remember, people like Claudia Peterson were not warned.
Every week I go to the cemetery and put balloons on Bethany's grave because there's nothing else I can do. A couple of people have said to me, well, when are you going to get over this? And, I said, well, I have to do something.
Today, what Claudia Peterson does to keep this issue alive is to spend time with people whose parents and grandparents also were not warned. On this day, Cassie Delgado's daughter Chelsea was dying of a brain tumor, with only days to live.
Chelsea, hi. Oh, she's cold. Chelsea. She's just beautiful. You look a lot like my little girl did. She got sick too, but she's okay now. She went to heaven. What the Department of Energy and the government, their decisions they've made have devastated our lives. My life's been devastated and it'll never be the same. And it wasn't my decision. People making decisions for us that are destroying our lives, and we have no say.
The morning after this visit, Chelsea Delgado died. She was 4 years old. Four years ago, Congress allocated $200 million in compensation for those Congress believed had been affected by the radiation. But the Justice Department imposed rigid restrictions on who would qualify, and only half the money has been dispensed. When we come back, American soldiers who were ordered to witness the testing.
Turning Point, the cover-up at Ground Zero, continues in a moment.